Welcome to Just Asia, AHRC TV's weekly human rights program. These are the headlines. Rohingya crisis could spark regional conflict, says UN Human Rights Commissioner. UN Rights Commissioner meet with activists and abuse victims. Constitutional debates in Philippines ignore rights protection. Police in Nepal torture 14-year-old boy. Urgent appeals from India and Indonesia. Welcome to AHRC TV's Just Asia. I am Amil Sampath. This week Just Asia begins with Burma, with the UN Human Rights Chief warning that the government's prosecution of Rohingya Muslim minority has the potential to spark regional conflict. It is sometimes said that today's human rights violation will become tomorrow's conflicts, Mr. Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein said on Monday. If the Rohingya crisis were to spark a broader conflict based on religious identities, the ensuing dispute could be a cause for great alarm. According to Zeid, the spasm of violence that began in August and sparked the refugee crisis were the culmination of 5 decades of discrimination and violence against the Rohingya in Burma's Rakhine state. Meanwhile, the Burmese government consistently denies any atrocities have taken place and insists Rohingya are illegal immigrants. Earlier this week, the Associated Press confirmed at least 5 mass graves found in Rakhine through multiple interviews with more than 24 survivors in Bangladesh refugee camps and through timestamps cell phone videos. The Burmese government has acknowledged only 1 mass grave contained 10 terrorists in the village of Indin. The graves are the newest piece of evidence suggesting genocide. Indonesia saw the visit of the United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights, Mr. Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein, this week from February 4th to 7th. Among the Commissioner's various meetings, 2 important ones were the civil society meetings hosted by Indonesia's Minister of Foreign Affairs and the meeting with the victims of human rights violations hosted by the National Commission on Human Rights. The meeting hosted by the Minister of Foreign Affairs was open to the public, with nearly 350 participants. The participants were mostly civil society and human rights activists, and they were able to have direct discussion with the High Commissioner. The meeting hosted by the National Commission on Human Rights was invitees only, most of whom were human rights abuse victims and their family members. Suciwati, widow of murdered activist Munir Talib, attended as well, as did minority groups such as the Ahmadiyya, Shia and Christians. Earlier this week, the Asian Human Rights Commission wrote an open letter to the High Commissioner highlighting major human rights violations in Indonesia. Civil society and human rights groups in the country are hopeful that the high-profile visit will significantly influence human rights development in Indonesia. Moreover, at the end of his visit, Mr. Zeid announced that his office would soon send a mission to West Papua to learn about the human rights situation there. For more information, Just Asia speak to Mr. Bedjo Untung, a survivor of 1965-1966 massacre.
What is the point of meeting with the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Pak Bedjo?
I'm very happy to meet him because I can speak directly what is the problem of the 1965 victims in Indonesia. I said to him that the happening or the tragedy of 1965 has happened for 53 years. Yeah? But until now, my government has never committed to fulfill the problem. That is why I asked to Mr. Zeid to make a further actions, if it is possible, to push the President or Mr. President Jokowi to let the Indonesian government solve the problem of 1965. I mean, the most important one, I say, if the Indonesian government cannot do this, it means that the government has no ability, willingness, and seriousness. So I said to him, the United Nations should take over, because this is already clearly stated according to the regulation. If the government cannot do in solving the problem, then the international law, international covenants and jurisprudences could over this one. So I mean, the United Nations should make an independent investigations to the victims, witnesses, and the perpetrators, make a forensic investigations, exhumations, and memorialization. So this is very important, because if there is no influence of the United States nation, I think the case of 1965 will be always forgotten by our state.
What is his response?
The response, Mr. Mr. Zeid said like this, he will speak to Mr. President about this. And also the staff, that is a woman, I forgot the name, said like this, I will say. So in this case, I still have a hope, as Mr. Zeid also said, please never lose hope in this case. Yeah. So I mean, I quite agree, but though I'm not sure that Mr. Jokowi can do this properly.
Next, in the Philippines, President Rodrigo Duterte's political allies are proposing to amend the constitution to change the country's presidential form to government to a federal one. The main reason given for these are to develop the power to a local government and allow equal distribution to wealth among local government units. While focusing on such political changes, the current constitutional debate is silent on constitutional rights. This is hardly surprising given President Duterte's rejections on human rights as values and his intimidation of institutions that check abuse. For instance, the Philippines legislature recently attempted to deprive the Commission on Human Rights of its operational budget by funding its only 1,000 peso. Meanwhile, the ombudsman locked horns with the president, refusing to implement his order suspending her overall deputy ombudsman, who reportedly leaked bank transactions of Duterte and his family without their consent. Philippines' 1987 constitution includes the Bill of Rights and many provisions relating to social justice. These are the culmination of people's aspirations after suffering for years under the dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos. Any debate on constitutional change must therefore include discussion on the protection of constitutional rights. Police in Nepal arrested a 14-year-old boy from his home in Japa district and beat him up. Plainclothes police arrested Sandeep Parsai on February 1st as he was entering his home at night. The officers accused him of being a thief and a drug addict. Sandeep was admitted to a hospital on February 4th, where the doctor said there are no visible signs of injuries on his body, but he has suffered from panic attacks. This case shows serious defect of the police. Activists are calling on the government to investigate the incident and suitably punish the officers involved in beating a little boy. Sandeep must also be provided with appropriate compensation. Finally, the Urgent Appeals Weekly features two cases from India and Indonesia. In Manipur, India, activists fighting for a fair and speedy investigation into the death of Pravish Chanam are facing police harassment. Pravish was found dead in suspicious circumstances in Noida, and his body was cremated without further investigation. This is alleged to be a part of wider epidemic of violence against northeastern people in the National Capital Region (NCR) and the apathy of investigating agencies. In Indonesia's Papuan province, an indigenous Papuan was tortured to death by army personnel. 3 army officials illegally detained Mr. Isak Dewayanukwa and then tortured him to death. The army personnel then forced Ishak's family to accept monetary compensation and sign a letter agreeing to drop the case. That is all for this episode of Just Asia. For more on these and other issues, please visit www.humanrights.asia or www.ahlrc.asia/justasia. Thank you for watching and see you next week.